Welcome forward here with The Eternal Poles by Claude Bragdon. We're in Chapter 6. This is entitled I Am That, and it is written in 3 parts, and each will be a pause. The life force is the only abiding reality, the personality, until its reconciliation with the life force, is a simulacrum, a mirage. The intellectual perception of this as truth will get us nowhere. It must be realized in experience. If we are to honor every truth by use, how shall we honor this one? What shall I do to be saved? The answer to this world-old question has inspired all scriptures and whole libraries of theology, but it is answered in the 3 words, Tat Svam Asi, that art thou. The phrase taught to a boy by his father, as recorded in the Upanishad. For the asseveration of identity expressed in I am that brings about the divine marriage between the life force and the personality, just as surely as the declaration I am thine unites lovers. But I am that also has another use and meaning. Like a ball thrown from the hand into the air, human life has 2 cycles, one of projection and the other recall. During the outgoing cycle, when the indwelling life force is engaged in identifying itself with objects for the purpose of self-realization, by the declaration, I am that, with reference to any and every manifestation, it becomes the manifestation. And this is the genesis of the personality itself. On the cycle of return, making the opposite declaration, not that, not that. The life force rid itself, one by one, of these accumulations, ravels out its veil of magical glamour, rests in itself. The thoughtless think that I, the unmanifested, possess a manifested form, not knowing my higher being, excellent and everlasting. Since each of us is indeed that, we should pursue the same method. As regards everything we desire to become or attain, we should declare, I am that. And of everything we want to be rid of, I am not that. As experiences multiply and wisdom deepens, we will come to desire only the great self without selflessness, or the selfishness. And thenceforth, I am that, need be our only form of invocation of that self. Stripped of everything but its essentials, that is the formula for transmutation of that lead which is the personality into the golden person, this is the royal road to union. But there are bypaths, intermediate processes, at which it will be profitable next to glance. Clearly, identification from the life force will be helped and hastened by becoming like it, by holding oneself responsive to its obscure impulsion, and by the constant endeavor to act in the prisoned state which the freedom and absoluteness of that. But how is this possible? And how is the purpose of the life force with relation to the personality to be known? Not through the rational mind, except by indirection. Mind action is a reaction to something which has already transpired. The man in the brain puts the labels on the bottles and arranges them in neat rows only after life itself has filled them. The play of reason upon phenomenon dissects life and translates it in terms of inertia. The mind is the slayer of the real, and in therefore there is no salvation. The indication of direction and the stimulus to action must be sought for otherwhere. It is the intuition which deals with life directly and initiates into life's own domain. I shall not burden this book with instructions for the development of the intuition, having written about that already in the court of the veiled queens. Let it suffice to say that the intuition is not less susceptible of development than the mind, the imagination, or any other human faculty, even though its conscious culture has not been seriously undertaken. Of the technique of liberation of the life force, this culture will naturally form a part, for it is through the intuition that the life force is able to communicate its will most surely to the personal conscience. Faith is the most powerful stimulus to the growth of the intuition. Skepticism, a product purely of the mind, is a destroyer of faith and consequently inimical to the growth. Though not without its use as an antidote to the crass credulancy, skepticism is no more than a weed in the garden where grow such flowers of the spirit as is faith. The two are antipodal and cannot occupy the same consciousness at one time and the same time. Skepticism has its roots in indifference that what is to come cannot be widely different from what is, that everything derives from the past. Faith is the intimation that some things derive from the future, that what is to be will be unlike anything that has ever been before. It is the nature of the reason to discover in every phenomena an antecedent cause, to trace it to its origin in the past. But some phenomena originate not in the past, but in the future. They are manifestations not of things which the time stream flowing from the past has swept into any given present moment, but which the time stream of the future has borne there. For some time flows simultaneously in two directions, and every human consciousness is a meeting place of that double tide. Just as in human body there are organs and muscles which are in a state of de-evolution, and others, like the pituitary body and the pineal gland, which have not come to the full flower, so there are faculties inherited from the past, like animal instincts, which are gradually disappearing, and others inherited from the future, which are only beginning to appear. Intuition is one of these faculties, but because the flow of time is an illusion of the limited consciousness and is not extant from the standpoint of life force, in the same way that the flow of ocean tides may be said to be non-existent save from the standpoint of the shallows of the shore, it would be more correct to say that intuition is a phase of the growing awareness of the personality to the life force, of which faith is an ulterior phase, operating, as it were, above upon the intuition. Still higher and more remote is the certainty expressed by the phrase, "I know that my Redeemer liveth." Of this certainty, faith itself is but the pale reflection and precursor, the shadow on the threshold of the life or the house of life cast by the Master at the door. Polarity. Life's uttermost power-imparting secret is that of polarity. Though everywhere in evidence, it is unperceived and unregarded, an obvious truth not sufficiently made use of. We antagonize on through alterations both form, positive to negative and negative to positive, and by these means the life force slowly develops in us an androgynous nature. Cooperation with the life force would consist in acting in all things as though one were completely bipolar, becoming in any given situation neither active or passive, making oneself at the will of the bow or the arrow, granite or wax. And this would extend with least things to greatest, from keeping cool in summer to keeping cool in the face of danger, from keeping warm in winter to warming the heart by the excess of exercise of affection. To everything one would oppose its opposite. Let a man overcome anger by love. Let him overcome evil by good. Let him overcome the greedy by liberating, the liar by truth. In pursuance of this discipline, he will seek out, or at least not struggle to avoid, contrast conditions and experiences. He will endeavor to adjust himself to the antipathic person and to alien environments. He will discover and push back the boundaries of his endurance both by denial and by indulgence, because one never knows what is enough until he knows what is more than enough. Do what you are afraid to do. Enter every Bluebeard's chamber. Beard the lion in its den. From among the thorns of passion pluck the rose of dispassion. Gain safety through exposure. There are two antithetical foundation stops in human life, just as there are in an organ, which control all the others. Until these are brought under control of the will and made to operate as one's pleasure, such exercise as the foregoing will fail to their full effect. In most cases, people operate with only the first of these stops, which is consciousness in its active, outgoing state or condition, the cycle of I am that. There is another entire hemisphere of human experience practically unexplored by us of the West, whose consciousness are predominantly centrifugal, whose yoga is the yoga of action. This is the cycle of I am not that. It corresponds to the yoga of contemplation as practiced for centuries throughout the East. Both of these disciplines are necessary for the development of perfect bipolarity. They are related to one another as if sleeping or waking. For within the space of our sleeping and our waking, the entire scheme of things is compressed. During sleep, the indwelling consciousness interrupts all external communication, draws up its bridges, and repairs its own world of the organic activity and inner life in order to energize the more effectively in the waking or outgoing state, to which to return restored and ready for the renewal of the conflict in the dusty arena of every day. To such a refuge from the world and its affairs, one should be able to repair at will and in full consciousness. The power to do so is gained by being still, with more than stillness, by directing the conscious inward and holding it with perfect steadiness by means of intense concentration upon single image or idea. This is only initiatory in the real object of meditation, which is union with the life force at its source. In the outer world of concretedness, we encounter only its masks, this is to say, its aspects and images. But in the inner world of abstractness to which meditation gives entrance dwells always the active and intelligent. Cause, the repairer, the self of all separated selves. For instruction in this form of yoga, I refer the interested reader to my essay Meditation. So there I need only add that it is integral, an expungible part of this self-discipline, which leads to liberation from the prison of the personal self. It is both difficult and dangerous, but what of that? Dwellers of the threshold. In a world all compounded of danger, 'tis man the perdition to be safe. Mark Twain said that the most dangerous place to be was in bed because the greatest number of people die there. And since no safety is anywhere to be found, courage is our best protection against our worst enemy, which is fear. Modern psychology, in its dredging of the depths of human consciousness, has discovered that practically all psychic disorders are caused by some form of subjective fear. This gives added point to that most ancient precept, fear nothing but fear. Our fears are always of the unknown, the untried, the alien, of every kind of otherness. This is perhaps the reason why the most ubiquitous of all fears are of solitude, death, and sex. For as Nietzsche says, how unknown to each other are man and woman. Social life is a man's self-made defense against the fear of solitude, religion against the fear of death, while the monastic Puritanism and prostitution of three of his refuges from the fear of sex, prostitution by lowered dimensionalizing it, and so clipping its wings. But solitude, death, and sex are all gateways to the world of the wondrous. Solitude, because it is the chamber where dwells the immortal beloved. Death, because, like sleep, it is an escape from the dusty arena. And sex, because if entered under the protection of those two bright guardians of the threshold, love and faith, it leads to a more abundant life. Fear is nearly always the fear of change, involving the destruction of the existing order, but such destruction of the old is a condition of growth of the new. The seed has to suffer disruption in order to become a tree, and the personality must simply lose itself in the life force, lose its life in order to find it. Because fear is of the personality in opposition to the life force, the cure for fear is at one-ment. And it is also the cure for sorrow, because the personality alone can suffer. The life force is a little subject to suffering as the sun is affected by that which it shines. Fear and inertia, or rather the fear of not continuing inertia, are the thief or the chief deterrence to that development which leads to freedom. This is the reason why that active and intelligent cause, which is the life force, seems so relentless in its action. It must destroy in order to transform. It must tirelessly pursue in order to eternally redeem. The personality strives desperately to maintain its status quo by fortifying itself in decaying institutions, folkways, and social customs. Like somnambulist in the sweet stupor, it permits itself to be controlled by the ghosts of old thoughts, old habits, and old desires. But from the hound of heaven, there is no refuge anywhere. Its forms are protean, its ingenuity exhaustless. The wisdom of agree with thine adversity. Let me say that again. The wisdom of agree with thine adversary quickly derives from the fact that the adversary is ever the life force in some new disguise, subjecting the personality to some new tests, revealing some self-element, forcing home some new awareness of itself. It is able to operate in this way because it is not only one, but all, and therefore any. That is to say, any personality may be made at any given moment for any given purpose, one of its masks. The personality is the life force crucified upon the cross of time-space. Eliminate this, and the two are the same, just as the acorn and the oak are the same, save for a difference in time. Or, to use another figure, time-space is that prism which refracts the white light of the life force into the manifold and multicolored forms of life. Next to fear, self-pity is perhaps the most virulent of all subjective poisons because it brings about an exaggeration and intensification of the personality, a nursing, coddling, spoiling of that which should be firmly and dispassionately dealt with. Self-pity always involves a reaching out for the pity of others and the cherishing of a sense of injury when it is withheld. The corrective of self-pity is its reversal, compassion for all suffering, with no thought of self. Pride is another stimulant which keeps the personality alert and alive and alarmed against the divine invasion. Pride is one of the forms which fear assumes, the fear of the humiliation or loss of the personality. Pride is therefore always engaged in bolstering up, repairing, and defending the breaches in the barricade against the life force. It is scarce profitable to continue in this enumeration of the qualities which delay the dedication of the personality to the life force, for virtues are quite as likely to act as a deterrent as vices. These distinctions have no validity. Everything which keeps the consciousness fluid, sensitive to the inner direction, is a virtue, and anything which tends to harden and desensitize it is a vice. But there is one virtue which should not be overlooked in this connection, and that is the care and discipline of the body. Indeed, the very word virtue comes from the same root as virile, vigorous. The body should be thought of as a vehicle of the life force, of which the personality has temporarily gained possession, but which must one day be returned to its true owner by the repentant thief. If he returns it in a good condition, he will gain in grace. Health is the virtue of the body, sickness its vice. There is a point in Samuel Butler's whimsical suggestion that the sick person should be confined in jails and criminals sent to the hospitals. The body should be vitalized by deep breathing, exercised by swimming, skating, juggling, dancing, anything which will force it to move in new ways. It should be nourished on a highly solarized product of the vegetable kingdom rather than the charred remains of dead animals, given, in short, at least as much as skilled attention as a horse, because the body is indeed a very Pegasus capable of bearing the spirit to star garden of delight. But an action ever new is the greatest virtue, not action, or not that action which is merely active, but conscious, controlled, directed work, both inner and outer. This is a thing impossible without detachment and dispassion. The test of this dispassion is the degree of indifference one is able to feel in regards to one's fortune, good or bad, and a comparison with others. For when the vicissitudes of others become co-important with one's own, it is a sign that the life force is in command. Because it is no one personality profit at the expense of another, itself being all it is concerned with the well-being of all, not as self-seeking personalities, for in this there is no well-being. Let me say that sentence again. Itself being all it is concerned with the well-being of all, not as self-seeking personalities, for in this there is no well-being, but as organs of its own activity in which it's the high privilege of the redeemed personality to share. All this should cast a new clear light upon the Christian religion, which from first to last is an elaborate presentment under the guise of the dealings of God with man and the dealings of the life force with the personality. The sin of Adam is the inevitable revolt of the personality against the life force by the assertion of free will. The curse of Adam, and the sweat of thy face thou shalt eat bread, is the commitment of the masculine or positive aspect of the personality to continuous harsh labor of eradicating the thorns, also the thistles, which willfulness and ignorance have planted in the garden of his past. The curse of Eve, in sorrow shalt thou bring forth children, is the commitment of the feminine or negative part to the pain of bringing forth whatever it can of goodness and beauty through suffering and sacrifice. This continuing process of purification on the part of the personality prepares it for the coming of Christ, the life force manifesting as cosmic love and individual consciousness. The Immaculate Conception. Then follows the birth of Christ, the divine androgyny, the Son made in the image of the Father, self-originative, immortal, time-space transcending, the precursor of a new heaven and a new earth, because the life force, through the individual uniqueness of a transformed and transfigured personality, a uniqueness won in exile and through suffering, is able to dramatize, to realize itself anew. And the redeemed personality participates in this, sitteth on the right hand of the Father. And thus ends chapter 6 of the Eternal.